The half-blood vampire was hunted by his own father, but still returned to save him from the fire. The silver stake missed Elias' heart by inches, embedding itself in the stone wall behind him as he twisted away, feeling his father's breath on his neck and smelling the garlic oil that coated the weapon. Lord Marcus Thorne, legendary vampire hunter and master of the Northern Guild, had just tried to kill his own son in the corridor of their ancestral manor, and the look in his eyes said he would not miss a second time. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. "Father, please," Elias began, but Marcus was already drawing another stake from the bandolier across his chest. His weathered face twisted with something beyond rage, something that looked almost like grief. "You are not my son," Marcus said, his voice breaking on the last word. "My son died the night that creature seduced your mother. You are an abomination that wears his face." The words struck harder than any weapon could. Elias had lived 23 years in this house, trained in combat alongside his father, learned the hunter's code, memorized every weak point of every supernatural creature that plagued the Northern Territories. He had believed, foolishly perhaps, that his mixed blood was a secret shame they would never speak of aloud, that as long as he never fed, never transformed, never acknowledged the vampire heritage that pulsed beneath his human skin, they could pretend he was normal. The illusion had shattered 3 nights ago when Lady Morgana Blackwood arrived at their gates. She had been magnificent and terrible, a pure-blood vampire of the ancient line, with eyes like molten gold and hair that seemed to absorb all light. She had walked through their protective wards as if they were cobwebs, had smiled at the crosses that adorned every doorway, and had asked to speak with Lord Thorne about a matter of mutual interest. Elias had been in the library when she arrived, had felt her presence like a shock of ice water down his spine. Every instinct he had spent years suppressing had roared to life at once. The hunger, the recognition, the terrible, undeniable awareness that she was like him, or rather, that he was like her. She had come to warn them, she said. There was a war brewing in the vampire courts, a civil conflict that would spill over into the human world and leave thousands dead. The Crimson Council, the governing body of vampire nobility, had fractured into 2 factions. The traditionalists, who believed vampires should remain hidden and feed only on the willing, and the ascendants, who wanted to reveal themselves and claim dominion over humanity. The ascendants planned to strike at the hunter guilds first, Morgana had explained, seated in their formal parlor as if she belonged there. They see you as the greatest threat to their new order. Lord Thorne, your guild will be among the first to fall unless you act now." Marcus had listened with his characteristic stoicism, his hand never straying far from the consecrated blade at his hip. "And why would one of your kind warn us? What do you gain from this?" "Survival," Morgana had replied simply. "The Ascendant's ambitions will destroy us all. They will unite humanity against us, and this time, your kind will have weapons we cannot counter. Science has advanced. It will not be stakes and crosses alone. It will be fire and chemicals and systematic extermination. I do not wish to see my people wiped from the earth." It had been a compelling argument, delivered with conviction. Marcus had promised to bring the matter before the Guild Council. Morgana had inclined her head graciously and risen to leave. Then she had turned to Elias, who had been standing silently by the door, trying to make himself invisible. "You have your mother's eyes," she had said softly. "I knew her once. Katerina was a remarkable woman. She loved you very much." The temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. Marcus's hand had closed around his blade. "What did you say?" Morgana had looked genuinely surprised. "You did not know? I apologize, Lord Thorn. I assumed, but surely you must have realized. The boy carries vampire blood. It is obvious to any of our kind who looks at him." The following 3 days had been hell. Marcus had locked Elias in the eastern wing of the manor, had brought in 3 other senior hunters to interrogate him. They had tested his blood, forced him to touch holy relics, exposed him to sunlight for hours. The results had been inconclusive enough to save his life, but damning enough to condemn him. He could tolerate sunlight, though it caused him pain. He could touch blessed silver, though it burned. He had a heartbeat and could consume human food, but his canines were just slightly too long, his reflexes too fast, his night vision too perfect. He was Dhampir, half human, half vampire, an impossibility that should not exist. "Your mother lied to me," Marcus had said on the 2nd day, standing outside Elias's locked door. 24 years we were married. 24 years, and she never told me what happened that night in Blackmore Forest. She let me believe you were mine. "I am yours," Elias had replied desperately. "Blood doesn't define family. You raised me. You taught me everything I know. That makes you my father." "I raised a weapon that could destroy everything I have built," Marcus had said, and walked away. Now, that weapon was being deployed against him. Elias caught his father's wrist as the second stake came toward his chest, twisting hard enough to hear bones grind. Marcus grunted in pain but did not drop the weapon. They were evenly matched in strength, Elias realized with sick horror. All those years of training, all those sparring sessions where Marcus had praised his speed and power, had been building toward this moment. His father had been preparing to kill him. "I will not fight you," Elias said through gritted teeth, "but I will not let you murder me either. Whatever you think I am, I have never hurt an innocent person. I have stood beside you against monsters. That should count for something." "It counts for nothing," Marcus snarled, and suddenly there was a knife in his other hand, slashing toward Elias's throat. Elias released his father's wrist and leaped backward, his supernatural reflexes taking over. He moved faster than any human could, a blur of motion that carried him 15 feet down the corridor in the space of a heartbeat. Marcus's face went white, then red with fury. "You see? You cannot even pretend anymore. The monster shows itself." "I am not a monster!" The words tore from Elias' throat with more force than he intended, echoing through the stone corridors of the manor. "I have never killed. I have never fed. I have spent every day of my life fighting against what I am, trying to be worthy of the Thorn name. And you?" His voice broke. "You were supposed to love me regardless." For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in Marcus's eyes that might have been doubt or regret. Then it was gone, buried under decades of hunter's conditioning and the fresh wound of betrayal. "Love is not enough," Marcus said quietly. "Duty comes first, always. The guild laws are clear. Any vampire or vampire spawn found within our territories must be eliminated. No exceptions. Not even for—" He stopped, unable to say the words. "Not even for family," Elias finished for him. "I understand, Father." "I understand perfectly." He turned and ran, using his full speed now, no longer caring about hiding what he was. He raced through the manor's twisting corridors, past portraits of Thorn ancestors who had dedicated their lives to hunting creatures exactly like him, past weapons racks filled with tools designed to kill his mother's kind, past the great hall where he had celebrated his 20th birthday with his father's proud hand on his shoulder. He reached his chambers and grabbed the traveling pack he had prepared 2 days ago when he had first understood that this confrontation was inevitable. Inside were clothes, a few books, 300 crowns in gold coins, and a single miniature portrait of his mother, painted when she was young. Looking at it now, he could see what he had been blind to before: the unusual pallor of her skin, the slight sharpness of her features, the depth of her eyes that suggested centuries rather than decades. She had been a vampire. His mother had been a vampire, and somehow, impossibly, she had carried a child. Him. How was that possible? Vampires were undead, their bodies frozen in time, unable to create life. Unless she had been something else, something more, or something that happened so rarely it existed only in myths within myths. There was no time to contemplate the mystery. He could hear his father's footsteps approaching, and other footsteps with them, the entire household guard likely. Marcus would have alerted them all, turned every servant and soldier in the manor against him. Elias went to the window, pushed it open, and looked down at the 50-foot drop to the courtyard below. He had never tested the full extent of his supernatural abilities. He had been too afraid of what he might discover. Now he had no choice. He climbed onto the windowsill, took a breath, and jumped. The fall should have killed him, or at least broken both his legs. Instead, he landed in a crouch, the impact jarring but not damaging. His body had absorbed the force as if he weighed nothing at all, as if gravity itself had only a loose grip on his hybrid existence. He heard shouts from above and did not look back. He ran across the courtyard, scaled the outer wall with inhuman ease, and disappeared into the forest that bordered the Thorn estate. He ran until dawn, until his human lungs burned and his vampire blood sang with exhaustion. He finally collapsed in a clearing beside a stream, where the morning sunlight filtered through the canopy in painful golden shafts. Each ray that touched his skin felt like a needle, not quite burning, but close enough to make him gasp. This was his life now. Hunted by the only family he had ever known, belonging neither to the human world nor the vampire one, carrying a heritage he did not understand and had never wanted. He should hate his mother for what she had done, for the curse she had passed to him. But he could not. In his earliest memories, before she had died when he was 6, she had been nothing but loving. She had sung to him in an ancient language he did not recognize, had told him stories about stars and time and choices that echoed through centuries. She had held him when he woke from nightmares and had whispered that he was special, that he would do great things. She had also warned him near the end when the illness had been consuming her. "Be careful, little one," she had said, her hand cold in his small, warm palm. "There are people who will fear you for what you are, but never let their fear make you into the monster they expect. Promise me." He had promised. He had been 6 years old and had not understood what she meant, but he had promised. Now, fleeing through the wilderness with his father's hunters surely already on his trail, he finally understood. And he renewed that promise, speaking it aloud to the uncaring forest and the painful sun. "I will not become the monster. No matter what happens, I will not become the monster." He had no plan beyond survival. No destination except a way. He was, for perhaps the first time in his life, completely alone. That solitude lasted exactly 3 hours. He smelled the smoke before he saw it. Thick, acrid, wrong. Not the clean scent of a campfire or even a forest fire, but something chemical, something deliberately set. He followed it despite every survival instinct screaming at him to run in the opposite direction. The village of Millbrook was burning. He stood at the forest's edge and watched the flames consume the small farming community where his family had bought grain and wool for generations. The fire was unnatural, burning blue and green in places, spreading too fast and too uniformly to be accidental. And in the center of the conflagration, silhouetted against the flames, stood figures that moved with liquid grace and supernatural speed. Vampires, a dozen of them at least, wearing identical red cloaks embroidered with a symbol he recognized from his studies, a rising sun pierced by a sword, the mark of the Ascendants. They were killing everyone, not just feeding, which would have been horror enough, but systematically slaughtering every living thing in the village. Men, women, children, livestock, nothing was being spared. Elias watched a young boy, perhaps 8 years old, run from a burning cottage directly into the arms of a male vampire with aristocratic features and blood-soaked hands. The vampire grabbed the child by the throat, and Elias's body moved before his mind could catch up with what he was doing. He had no weapons except a hunting knife at his belt. He had no plan except to reach that child before it was too late. He had no hope of victory against a dozen pure-blood vampires. He charged anyway. His speed surprised them. He covered the 100 yards between the forest and the village in seconds, moving faster than he had ever dared to move before. He slammed into the vampire, holding the child with enough force to send them both tumbling. The boy fell free, scrambled to his feet, and ran. "Run!" Elias screamed at the survivors he could see huddled in doorways and behind carts. "Get to the forest! Run now!" The vampire he had tackled recovered quickly, rising with inhuman grace and fixing Elias with eyes that had gone completely red. "Well, well, what do we have here?" His nostrils flared. "Oh, how interesting. A half-breed. The Ascendants did not mention there were any damp here in this region." "Leave them alone," Elias said, positioning himself between the vampire and the fleeing villagers. "Your war is not with them." "Our war is with all of humanity," the vampire replied, smiling to show fangs that were far too long and sharp. "And with all who would protect them, including mongrel half-bloods who do not know their place." He moved, a blur of speed and violence. Elias barely managed to dodge, feeling claws rake across his shoulder deep enough to draw blood. He countered with his knife, aiming for the heart, but the vampire was too fast, too experienced. The blade scraped across ribs without penetrating. They fought in a circle of fire, trading blows too fast for human eyes to follow. Elias was faster than any human, stronger than any human, but his opponent had centuries of combat experience and none of the hesitation that came from still being partially mortal. Within 30 seconds, Elias was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his shirt torn to ribbons, his vampire blood struggling to heal damage faster than it was being inflicted. "You fight well for a mongrel," the vampire said, not even breathing hard. "But you are outmatched. Surrender, and I will make your death quick." "Go to hell!" Elias gasped and lunged again. This time, the vampire caught his wrist, twisted until bones cracked, and drove his other hand toward Elias's chest with fingers curled into claws. Elias watched those claws coming for his heart and knew with absolute certainty that he was about to die. A wall of flame erupted between them. The vampire shrieked and leaped back, his cloak catching fire. Elias stumbled away from the sudden heat, cradling his broken wrist, and looked for the source of the magical fire. Lady Morgana Blackwood stood at the village's edge, her hands wreathed in golden flames that did not burn her pale skin. Behind her stood a dozen more vampires, but these wore blue cloaks marked with a silver moon. The traditionalists, Elias realized, the opposing faction. The Ascendants have violated the Treaty of Shadows, Morgana announced, her voice carrying across the burning village with supernatural clarity. This attack on a protected human settlement is an act of war. By the authority of the Crimson Council's Old Guard, I am authorized to respond with lethal force. The Ascendant vampires gathered together, abandoning their slaughter to face this new threat. Their leader, a female vampire with silver hair and ancient eyes, stepped forward. The old council is dead, Morgana. You cling to outdated laws. We are the future. We will no longer hide in shadows while cattle multiply and consume the earth. These cattle have names and families and the right to exist without being murdered by creatures who should know better, Morgana replied. I will give you one chance to retreat. Take it or face the consequences. The silver-haired vampire laughed. You bring a dozen fledglings to challenge an Ascendant war party? You always were a fool, Morgana. I bring 12 of the finest warriors of the old families, Morgana corrected. And I bring something else. I bring purpose. We fight for a future where both our kinds can exist. You fight only for domination and death. History shows us which cause inspires greater strength. The two groups of vampires clashed in the center of the burning village, and Elias had never seen anything like it. They moved like dancers, like lightning, like murder given form. Fire and ice and shadow became weapons. Blood painted the cobblestones. Ancient grudges played out in seconds of terrible violence. Elias, broken and bleeding, dragged himself toward the surviving villagers who were still fleeing toward the forest. He used his body to shield an elderly woman from falling debris, guided a young mother carrying 2 children away from a collapsing building, and pulled a wounded man from under a burning cart. His vampire heritage might make him a monster in his father's eyes, but right now it was keeping these people alive. The battle between the two vampire factions ended as quickly as it had begun. The Ascendants retreated, carrying their wounded, their leader screaming threats and promises of vengeance. Morgana's forces had won, but at a cost. 3 of her warriors lay dead or dying, their bodies already beginning to decay with the rapid dissolution that claimed vampires beyond healing. Morgana herself walked through the burning village, using her fire magic to extinguish the flames before they could spread to the forest. When she reached Elias, who was slumped against a stone well with a dozen refugees gathered behind him, she stopped and tilted her head. "I did not expect to find you here, young Thorn," she said. "I heard your father declared you an enemy of the guild." "News travels fast," Elias managed. his broken wrist slowly knitting itself back together with pulses of sickening heat. Bad news always does. She knelt beside him, studying his wounds with a clinical eye. You fought one of them, alone. That was either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, he admitted. I couldn't just watch them murder a child. Something in Morgana's expression softened. Your mother would be proud. She always believed in protecting the innocent, regardless of species. Elias looked up sharply. You said you knew her. Tell me the truth. What was she? Morgana was silent for a long moment, her golden eyes reflecting the dying fires. That is a conversation for when you are not bleeding and surrounded by traumatized humans. But I will tell you this much. Katarina was one of the rarest creatures in our world. She was hope made manifest. And she loved your father truly, despite what he now believes. Will you help these people? Elias gestured to the refugees. They need shelter, supplies, protection. The Ascendants may come back. I will send them to Sanctuary, Morgana said. It is a human settlement under traditionalist protection, warded against vampire attack and supplied by our network. They will be safe there. She paused. And you? What will you do now, Dampire? You are hunted by your father's people, and too human to find easy welcome among mine. Elias looked at his hands, which were covered in soot and blood and the evidence of violence he had never wanted to embrace. He thought about his mother's warning, about the promise he had made in the forest, about the child he had saved and the monsters he had fought. I do not know, he admitted, but I know I cannot hide anymore. If there is a war coming between vampires and humans, innocent people like these will be caught in the middle. Someone needs to protect them. Someone who understands both sides. Morgana smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her terrible beauty into something almost warm. Then perhaps you will allow me to offer you a proposition, young Thorn. I am gathering allies for the fight against the Ascendants. I need people who can move between our two worlds, who have loyalty to both humanity and vampire kind. You are uniquely qualified. You want me to spy? Elias asked. I want you to be a bridge, Morgana corrected. To prove that our kinds do not have to be enemies, to show both sides that there is another way. Your father's guild will not listen to me, but they might listen to you. The human settlements under threat need someone who can fight beside them and who understands the supernatural forces arrayed against them. You could be that someone. My father wants me dead, Elias said bitterly. The guild has declared me an abomination. Why would they trust me? They might not, Morgana acknowledged. But desperate times make for strange alliances. When the Ascendants come for them in force, they will need every advantage they can get, including a Dampier who knows their tactics and can match their speed. Elias looked at the refugees again, at their terrified faces and their grateful eyes. He had saved perhaps 30 people today. If the Ascendants attacked every human settlement in the Northern Territories, thousands would die, tens of thousands, unless someone stopped them. What would I have to do? He asked. Come with me to Sanctuary. Meet with the other traditionalists. Learn what we know about the Ascendants' plans. Then decide for yourself where you can do the most good. Morgana extended a hand to help him up. I will not force you, Elias Thorn, but I think you already know that you cannot run from this war. It will find you regardless. She was right, and they both knew it. Elias took her hand and let her pull him to his feet. His wounds had mostly healed already, his vampire blood doing its work despite his mixed heritage. He would have scars, but he would survive. He always seemed to survive, no matter what the world threw at him. One condition, he said. If I agree to help you, I need information about my mother. Not just hints and riddles, the full truth about what she was and how I came to exist. Morgana nodded. Agreed. You deserve to know your own history. It is a strange tale, and not entirely a happy one, but it is yours. I will tell you everything I know. They stood there in the ruins of Millbrook, surrounded by ash and death and the beginning of a war neither side could afford to lose. Elias looked toward the distant manor where he had grown up, where his father was likely already organizing hunting parties to track him down and end his abominable existence. He should have felt grief or rage or despair. Instead, he felt only a crystalline clarity, a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. His whole life, he had been trying to be someone he was not, denying half his nature to fit into a world that would never fully accept him. Perhaps it was time to stop running from what he was and start using it to protect those who could not protect themselves. I will come with you, he said, but I need to make one thing clear. I am not doing this for vampires or for humans. I am doing it for the innocent people caught between your war. That is where my loyalty lies. I would expect nothing less, Morgana said. Your mother was the same. She fought for those who could not fight for themselves, regardless of what form they took. She turned to her warriors. Gather the survivors. We leave for sanctuary within the hour. The Ascendants will not give us time to mourn. As the traditionalist vampires moved to help the refugees and extinguish the last of the fires, Elias walked to the well and washed the blood from his hands. The water was cold and clear, untainted by the violence that had occurred around it. He stared at his reflection, his mother's eyes in his father's face, human and vampire mixed into something new. He had spent his entire life trying to be fully one or the other. Maybe it was time to accept that he would always be both, that his strength came not from denying half his heritage, but from embracing the whole of it. The sun was setting as they left Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Elias walked beside Morgana at the head of a column of refugees and warriors, leaving behind the only home he had ever known. Somewhere behind them, his father's hunters would be tracking him, stakes and blessed silver ready to end his existence. Somewhere ahead, the Ascendants were planning their next attack, their next slaughter. And somewhere in the middle, Elias would find his place in this war, not as a human or as a vampire, but as something the world had never seen before, a bridge between two kinds. A weapon that could protect rather than destroy. A son who would save his father, whether Marcus Thorne wanted to be saved or not. The journey to Sanctuary took 3 days through dense forest and mountain passes that seemed designed to hide their destination from casual discovery. The refugees were exhausted, traumatized, and deeply suspicious of the vampires who had rescued them. Morgana kept her warriors at a distance, letting Elias serve as the intermediary between the two groups. It was an uncomfortable position, trusted by neither side. The humans saw his speed and strength and suspected him of being a full vampire playing some elaborate game. The vampires smelled his human blood and treated him with the same wariness they might show a trained attack dog, useful but unpredictable. Only the children seemed unconcerned by his mixed nature. The boy he had saved from the Ascendant vampire, whose name was Thomas, attached himself to Elias with the fierce loyalty of a 7-year-old who had found a hero. He peppered Elias with questions about fighting and monsters and whether Dhampirs could turn into bats. "No," Elias said for the 3rd time as they walked, "I cannot turn into a bat, or mist, or a wolf. I am just faster and stronger than normal humans, and harder to kill." "I do not live forever like the Pale people," Thomas asked, using the refugees' term for vampires, spoken in hushed tones as if saying the word too loudly might summon more of them. I do not know, Elias admitted. I have not exactly had time to experiment with my lifespan. My ma says the pale people are evil, but Lady Morgana saved us, and you saved me, so maybe some of them are good? Out of the mouths of children came a wisdom that adults often forgot. Maybe some of everyone are good, Elias suggested, and some are not. Being human or vampire does not decide that. What you choose to do with your power does. Thomas considered this seriously. When I grow up, I want to be like you, protecting people. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. That is a good goal, but you do not need my blood to do it. You just need courage and a willingness to stand up when others would run away. Did you run away when the fire monsters came? Fire monsters was the refugees' term for the ascendants, which was more accurate than they knew. No, Elias said quietly. I did not run, but I was very afraid. You were? Thomas seemed shocked by this admission. Of course. Only fools are not afraid when facing danger. The trick is to act anyway, even when you are terrified. Thomas pondered this, and then nodded with childlike certainty. I will remember that. They made camp that night in a clearing, where Morgana created a circle of protective fire that would keep out any ascendant scouts. The refugees huddled on one side, the vampires on the other, and Elias found himself sitting alone in the middle, belonging to neither group. Morgana joined him after an hour, carrying 2 leather flasks. She offered one to him. Warmed wine. I thought you might need it. Elias accepted gratefully. The night was cold, and his mixed blood meant he felt temperature more acutely than a full vampire would. Thank you. They drank in silence for a moment before Morgana spoke. You are good with the boy. Patient. Kind. Those are not qualities I expected from Marcus Thorne's son. My father is not without kindness, Elias said defensively. He simply believes that duty must come before personal feelings. And where has that belief led him? To trying to murder his own child? Morgana's tone was not cruel, merely observant. Elias had no answer to that. I knew your father once, Morgana continued, long before you were born, during the treaty negotiations. He was young then, newly appointed as the Guildmaster of the North. Passionate, idealistic. He believed that hunters and supernatural beings could find a way to coexist peacefully. This surprised Elias. The man he knew was pragmatic to the point of coldness, unwavering in his conviction that vampires were monsters to be eliminated. What changed? Your mother, Morgana said simply. Or rather, what happened to her. But that is part of the story I promised you, and we should begin at the beginning. She settled more comfortably against the tree they sat beneath. Tell me, Elias, what do you know about the genesis of vampires? They are humans who were turned by drinking vampire blood and dying, Elias recited from his hunter's training. They rise 3 nights later as immortal predators who must feed on human blood to survive. That is the common transformation, yes, but it is not the only way vampires come into being. There are older forms, rarer forms. The first vampires were not turned, they were born. Or perhaps created is a better word. Ancient magic, the kind that predates human civilization, can produce beings that are vampire from the moment of their creation. Like what? Gods? Elias asked skeptically. Like mistakes, Morgana said, or miracles, depending on your perspective. There are certain places in the world where the veil between life and death grows thin. Certain rituals that, when performed in these places, can bind a soul to a body in unusual ways. The first vampires were humans who died in such places and were reborn as something else, something that remembered being human but could never be human again. What does this have to do with my mother? Patience, I am getting there. Morgana took another sip of wine. These original vampires, the ones born of ritual and thin veils, had abilities that turned vampires do not possess. They could walk in sunlight, though it pained them. They could create offspring in the traditional way, blending their immortal nature with a mortal partner to produce children who carried both bloodlines. Elias sat up straighter. Dhampir? Yes. Though the term usually refers to the offspring of a turned vampire and a human, which is theoretically impossible since turned vampires cannot reproduce. True Dhampir, like yourself, come from original vampires. Morgana looked at him directly. Your mother, Katerina, was one of the last of the original bloodline. She was vampire, but not in the way the world usually understands the term. She was something older and far more rare. Why did she never tell my father? Why hide what she was? Because by the time she met Marcus, she had spent 2 centuries trying what she was. She had seen too much death, caused too much death, fed on too many innocent people in her youth. She wanted to be human again, or as close to human as her nature would allow. She found a ritual, an ancient magic that could temporarily suppress her vampire nature, make her appear fully mortal. Morgana's voice grew soft. She used that ritual when she came to your father's lands. She made herself human enough to love him, to marry him, to conceive you. But the ritual failed, Elias guessed. The ritual held for 6 years. 6 years of the happiness she had always craved. Then you were born, and the strain of carrying a child, of channeling life when she was fundamentally a creature of death, it broke the spell. Her vampire nature returned. Not fully, not all at once, but slowly, inexorably. By the time you were 6, she was dying, not from being a vampire, but from the magical conflict between what she had been and what she had tried to become. Elias felt tears burning his eyes. She died because of me. She died because you loved you, Morgana corrected firmly. And because she loved your father. She knew the pregnancy might kill her. She did it anyway. That was the kind of person Katerina was. She would sacrifice anything for those she loved. Did my father know? Before she died, did he know what she was? Morgana shook her head. She made me promise never to tell him. She wanted him to remember her as his human wife, not as the vampire who had deceived him. I kept that promise for 17 years, until the Ascendants forced my hand. Why did you tell him now? You must have known it would destroy everything. Because the alternative was worse. The Ascendants discovered that Marcus Thorne had a vampire son. They were going to reveal it themselves, publicly, during a guild council meeting. They would have framed it as proof that the hunters could not be trusted, that even the great Lord Thorne had been corrupted by vampire influence. It would have shattered the guild's unity at the worst possible time. Elias understood the strategy. So you told him first, privately. Gave him the chance to act before it became a public scandal. I had hoped he would be more understanding, Morgana admitted. I thought, perhaps, that after 23 years of raising you, his love might overcome his prejudice. I was wrong. They sat in silence, watching the magical flames dance around the camp's perimeter. Elias felt the weight of his mother's sacrifice settling into his bones. transforming his understanding of everything he had been. "She left you something," Morgana said after a while. "Before she died, she gave me a letter to give to you when you were old enough to understand the truth. I have carried it for 17 years, waiting for the right moment." She reached into her cloak and withdrew a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "I think that moment has arrived." Elias took the letter with trembling hands. His mother's handwriting was elegant, the script of someone who had lived through centuries when penmanship was an art form. He broke the seal and read by the light of Morgana's flames. "My dearest Elias, if you are reading this, then you know what I was, what you are. I can only imagine the confusion and pain this knowledge brings you, and for that I am deeply sorry. I want you to understand that everything I did for love. I loved your father with a depth that surprised me after 2 centuries of believing myself incapable of such feeling. And I loved you from the moment I knew you existed within me, even knowing that carrying you would likely end my existence. You are not a curse or a mistake, my son. You are a miracle. You are proof that life and death, mortality and immortality, human and vampire, these things are not as separate as the world believes. You are the bridge between them. I know the path ahead will not be easy. You will face prejudice from both sides. Humans will fear your vampire nature. Vampires will disdain your humanity. But do not let their fear define you. You have the strength of both bloodlines and the weaknesses of neither. Use that gift wisely. There will come a time when you must choose between the world your father represents and the world I came from. When that moment arrives, do not choose either. Choose the third path, the one that only you can walk, the path of protection, of balance, of being the guardian that stands between 2 kinds and keeps both safe from each other. Your father loves you, even if his duty makes him forget that love. If you ever have the chance to save him, do not hesitate. Show him through your actions what I could not show him through words, that what we are matters less than who we choose to be. I will always love you, little one, always. Your mother, Katerina." Elias read the letter twice, then a third time, his vision blurring with tears he no longer tried to hold back. His mother had known. She had known exactly what his life would be like, the struggles he would face, and she had loved him enough to give him life anyway. "She was wise," Morgana said softly, "wiser than most beings I have met in 5 centuries of existence. And she was right about you. You are the bridge between our kinds, Elias. That is why I need your help. Not just for the traditionalists, but for everyone. This war the Ascendants are starting will destroy both vampires and humans if it is not stopped." Elias carefully folded the letter and placed it inside his shirt, against his heart. "Tell me about Sanctuary. What am I walking into?" "A community unlike any other," Morgana said. "Humans and traditionalist vampires living together in a protected territory. We have treaties, rules, systems for coexistence. Humans provide blood willingly, through donation rather than predation. Vampires provide protection, healing magic, and knowledge. It is not perfect. There are tensions, misunderstandings, occasional violations of trust, but it works. It proves that our kinds can live together peacefully. How many places like this exist? 4 currently. Sanctuary is the oldest and largest. But the Ascendants see them as abominations, proof that the traditionalists have gone soft. They plan to destroy all 4 sanctuaries and everyone in them, to send a message that there is no middle ground, No possibility of peace. When? Soon. We have intelligence that suggests a coordinated attack within the month. Thousands of lives are at stake. Morgana met his eyes. That is why I need you. The human residents of Sanctuary need to be evacuated or defended, but they will not listen to vampire warnings. They need someone who understands their world, who can speak to them as an equal rather than as a predator trying to manipulate them. You want me to convince them to leave their homes. I want you to give them a choice. Stay and fight alongside us, or evacuate to safer territories. But the choice must be theirs, made with full knowledge of the danger. Can you do that? Elias thought about Thomas, about the other refugees who had lost everything when the Ascendants attacked. He thought about his father's guild halls, filled with hunters who would be slaughtered if the Ascendants' war came to them unprepared. He thought about his mother's letter and her instruction to choose the third path. I can do that, he said, but I need something in return. Name it. When this is over, if I survive, if we stop the Ascendants, I want safe passage back to my father's lands. I want the chance to warn him about what is coming. Even if he wants me dead, he deserves to know the truth about the threat his guild faces. Morgana was quiet for a long moment. That may be the most dangerous thing you could do. Marcus has made his position clear. He will not welcome you home. I know. But my mother asked me to save him if I could. I have to try. Very well. You have my word. Help me save Sanctuary, and I will get you safely to your father's territory. She extended her hand. Do we have an agreement? Elias clasped her hand. Her skin was cold, deathly cold, but her grip was firm, and her eyes were honest. We have an agreement. They reached Sanctuary at midday on the fourth day. The settlement was hidden in a valley surrounded by mountains, accessible only through narrow passes that could be easily defended. As they descended into the valley, Elias felt his breath catch. It was beautiful. Cottages with thatched roofs clustered around a central square where a market was in full swing. Fields of crops stretched toward the mountains, tended by humans and vampires working side by side. Children played in the streets, human children, laughing and running without fear. And everywhere, signs of the impossible coexistence his mother had dreamed of. A vampire with silver hair was teaching a group of human teenagers to read in the shade of a great oak. A human blacksmith was forging silver weapons while a vampire discussed the properties of different metals. In the town square, a mixed group was building what looked like a new well, humans and vampires lifting stones together. "Welcome to Sanctuary," Morgana said, smiling at his obvious amazement. "This is what the world could be if we let it." The refugees from Millbrook were greeted with compassion and efficiency. Within an hour, they had been assigned temporary housing, given food and clean clothes, and connected with healers, both human and vampire, who could tend to their physical and psychological wounds. Thomas hugged Elias fiercely before being led away by a kind-faced woman who ran the Sanctuary's orphanage. "You will stay, won't you?" the boy asked anxiously. "You will not leave." "I have work to do here," Elias assured him. "You will see me around." Morgana led Elias to the council house, a large stone building at the heart of the settlement. Inside, a diverse group was gathered around a circular table. 5 vampires and 5 humans, representing the joint leadership of Sanctuary. "This is Elias Thorne," Morgana announced, "son of Lord Marcus Thorne of the Northern Hunters Guild and son of Katarina of the original line. He is Dampier, and he has agreed to help us prepare for the coming attack." The reaction was mixed. The vampires looked intrigued or skeptical. The humans looked alarmed, their hands moving instinctively toward weapons. "Marcus Thorne's son?" said one of the humans, a scarred man in his 50s. The same Marcus Thorne who has killed more vampires than anyone in the Northern Territories? And we are supposed to trust his progeny? The same Marcus Thorne who currently wants me dead for being an abomination? Elias said calmly. I am not here representing my father. I am here because I watched the Ascendants burn Millbrook and slaughter innocents. I am here because Lady Morgana convinced me that Sanctuary represents something worth protecting. And what might that be? Asked a female vampire with scars across her face and arms. A warrior, clearly, who had seen considerable combat. Hope, Elias said simply. The hope that my mother believed in. The hope that humans and vampires do not have to be eternal enemies. That there is a third path between predation and extermination. The scarred human's expression softened slightly. You knew Katerina? She was my mother, Elias said. She died when I was 6, but she left me a letter. In it, she told me to be the bridge between our kinds, to protect both from each other. That is what I intend to do. Pretty words, said another vampire, this one young-looking, with cold eyes. But how do we know you will not betray us to your father's guild? How do we know this is not some elaborate hunter's trick? You do not, Elias admitted. You have no reason to trust me except for Morgana's word and my actions. So judge me by my actions. Give me a task. Let me prove myself. The council members exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Finally, the scarred human spoke. Very well. We have a problem that perhaps a vampire can solve. There is a hunter's garrison 3 days north of here. 50 soldiers, armed with blessed silver and holy weapons, led by a man named Captain Aldrich. They have been raiding our supply lines, attacking our scouts, and generally making life difficult. We have tried negotiation, but they see any vampire as a monster to be killed. You want me to negotiate with them? Elias guessed. We want you to convince them of the truth, that the Ascendants are the real threat, not the Traditionalists. That when the war comes in full force, they will need allies who understand the enemy. You speak their language, literally and figuratively. Perhaps they will listen to you where they would not listen to us. It was a test, and not a simple one. Hunters like Captain Aldrich would have been trained by people like his father. They would see his vampire blood and assume treachery. But if he could convince them, if he could forge an alliance between Sanctuary and the Hunters, it would prove his value to both sides. I will do it, Elias said, but I will need time to prepare. And I will need information about Captain Aldrich's background, his values, what motivates him. You will have it, the scarred human said. My name is Gerard, by the way. I lead the human contingent of Sanctuary's defense. If you can bring the garrison to our side, or even just get them to stop their attacks, you will have earned our trust. The meeting continued for another hour, with the council members briefing Elias on the political situation, the known ascendant movements, and the layout of the Hunters' garrison. By the time it ended, Elias's head was spinning with information, and his stomach was churning with anxiety. Morgana walked with him back through the settlement, pointing out key locations: the armory, the hospital, the blood donation center where human volunteers provided sustenance for the vampire population, the training grounds where mixed groups practiced combat techniques. You should rest, she said finally, stopping outside a small cottage near the edge of the settlement. This will be your quarters for as long as you stay with us. Tomorrow, we will begin preparing for your mission to the garrison. Elias entered the cottage to find it sparsely but comfortably furnished: a bed, a table, a fireplace, and shelves lined with books. On the table was a plate of bread and cheese, and beside it, a small vial of red liquid. blood. He stared at it for a long moment. He had never fed, never tasted human blood. It was the line he had refused to cross, the final proof that he was more human than vampire. But he was also exhausted. His wounds from the fight with the Ascendant were still healing, draining his energy. And if he was going to face a garrison of trained hunters, he needed to be at full strength. He picked up the vial, his hand trembling. The blood inside was still warm, freshly donated, not taken by force. That mattered, somehow. It made the act less monstrous. He drank. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Power flooded through his body like liquid fire. His remaining wounds healed in seconds. His senses sharpened until he could hear every heartbeat in the surrounding cottages, smell every scent on the evening breeze, see in the darkness as clearly as daylight. He felt faster, stronger, more alive than he had ever felt before. He also felt horrified at how good it felt. This was what he had been denying himself for 23 years. This feeling of completeness, of being fully himself. His vampire nature roared in satisfaction, no longer suppressed and ignored. He understood now why vampires fed. It was not just sustenance. It was euphoria. It was power. It was the closest thing to godhood a mortal creature could experience. It was also, he recognized, deeply dangerous. Because if he was not careful, he could lose himself in this feeling, could become the monster his father feared he would be. He sat on the bed and breathed slowly, deliberately, until the euphoria faded to a manageable hum in his veins. He was still himself. The blood had made him stronger, but it had not changed who he was or what he valued. He would feed when necessary, he decided. He would use this power to protect people, not to dominate them. That was the line he would draw, the principle he would not cross. He lay back on the bed and tried to sleep, but his enhanced senses made it difficult. He could hear everything: conversations in distant houses, animals moving through the forest, the heartbeats of 2 vampires standing guard at the settlement's entrance. And somewhere, very far away, but still audible to his blood-heightened ears, the sound of horns, hunting horns. His father's guild was on the move. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Morgana's intelligence network, a mix of vampire scouts and human informants, confirmed that Captain Aldrich's garrison was indeed planning another raid on Sanctuary supply lines. Elias would intercept them before they reached their target, present himself as a neutral party, and attempt to negotiate. Do not expect them to listen immediately, Gerard warned. Aldrich is a good man, but a stubborn one. He lost his wife and daughter to a vampire attack 10 years ago. He will not be easily convinced that some vampires can be trusted. I lost my mother to vampire nature too, Elias said quietly. Perhaps that will give us common ground. Gerard looked at him with something approaching sympathy. Maybe, but do not expect that shared pain to make him your friend. Sometimes grief hardens people, makes them see enemies everywhere. Elias departed Sanctuary alone at dawn, moving through the forest with supernatural speed. He covered ground that would take a normal human 3 days in less than 1, arriving at the garrison's location just as the sun was setting. The camp was professional and well defended. Wooden palisades, guard rotations, blessed salt circles, and multiple escape routes. Exactly what he would expect from his father's trained soldiers. He approached openly, hands raised to show he was unarmed, and called out in a clear voice, "My name is Elias Thorne. I come to speak with Captain Aldrich under the banner of parley. I mean no harm." Arrows were immediately trained on him from 6 different positions. Soldiers emerged from the palisade, weapons drawn, holy symbols raised. "Thorne?" one of them sounded shocked. "As in Lord Marcus Thorne?" "I am his son," Elias confirmed. Or I was. It is complicated. I need to speak with your captain. The information I carry concerns the safety of every hunter in the Northern Territories. There was conferring, whispered conversations he could easily hear with his enhanced senses. Finally, a man in his 40s emerged, Captain Aldrich presumably, marked by his superior armor and the deference the others showed him. Elias Thorne, Aldrich said, his voice hard. We received word from the guild that you have been declared a vampire and marked for execution. You have considerable courage coming here. Or considerable desperation, Elias replied. Captain, I need 10 minutes of your time. 10 minutes to explain what is happening, what threats are gathering, and why attacking Sanctuary right now is exactly what the real enemies want you to do. Sanctuary? Aldrich spat the word. That den of vampires and blood cattle? Why would I not attack it? Because it is not your enemy, Elias said. Because the vampires there have spent 20 years building a peaceful community with willing human participants. Because they are the only ones standing between humanity and an army of extremist vampires who want to enslave or exterminate every human on the continent. Aldrich laughed bitterly. And you expect me to believe this? A half-vampire comes to our camp and tells us that some vampires are good? Forgive me if I am skeptical. I expect you to listen before you decide, Elias said. You knew my father. You know he trained me in the Hunter's Code, taught me to identify threats and assess situations objectively. Use that training now. Look at me and tell me if I seem like a mindless monster or a man trying to prevent a catastrophe. Aldrich studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. 10 minutes, but you will be bound and surrounded by silver during our conversation. If you make any threatening move, my soldiers will put you down immediately. Agreed, Elias said. They bound his wrists with silver chains that burned his skin and made him gasp with pain. They led him inside the palisade to a command tent where Aldrich sat behind a field desk. 6 soldiers stood around Elias in a circle, crossbows loaded with silver-tipped bolts. Talk, Aldrich ordered. So Elias talked. He told them about the Ascendants, about the political fracturing of Vampire Society, about the attack on Millbrook and the dozens of other attacks being planned. He explained about the Traditionalists and their philosophy of coexistence, about Sanctuary and the thousands of innocent humans living there peacefully. He described the scale of the coming war and the fact that the Hunters' Guilds would be primary targets. The Ascendants see you as the greatest threat to their plans, Elias explained. They will wipe out every guild hall, every Hunter family, every person who has the knowledge and skill to fight them. You are not prepared for what is coming. No one is. But if we work together, Hunters, Traditionalists, and those of us caught between, we might have a chance. Why should I believe any of this? Aldrich demanded. For all I know, this is an elaborate trick to lower our defenses. Because my father taught me that honor matters more than allegiance, Elias said. Because I have nothing to gain from lying to you. Because in 6 days, when the Ascendants attack the Eastern Sanctuary and slaughter 2,000 people, you will remember this conversation and realize I was telling the truth. By then, it will be too late. 6 days? Aldrich leaned forward. You have specific intelligence about an attack? I have the intelligence that Morgana Blackwood's spy network has gathered over months of infiltrating Ascendant cells. They plan to attack all 4 sanctuaries simultaneously, make a public spectacle of destroying these communities, and use the fear to unite other vampire factions to their cause. After that, they come for the guilds. Aldrich was silent, his weathered face troubled. Even if I believed you, what would you have me do? Side with vampires against other vampires? Betray everything the guild stands for? I would have you side with innocents against monsters, Elias corrected. That is what the guild stands for, is it not? Protecting those who cannot protect themselves. There are human families in Sanctuary who have done nothing wrong, except trust that vampires could be more than predators. They deserve protection just as much as any other humans. And what about you? Aldrich asked. What do you gain from brokering this alliance? Where do your loyalties truly lie? It was the same question everyone asked, and Elias gave the same answer he always did. My loyalty is to the innocent. Human or vampire, I do not care. If you are not hurting anyone, if you are just trying to live your life in peace, then I will defend you. That is the code my mother taught me before she died. That is what I choose to stand for. Aldrich stared at him for a long time, then gestured to his soldiers. Remove the chains. The silver bindings fell away, leaving angry burns on Elias's wrists that immediately began to heal. Aldrich watched the accelerated healing with a mixture of fascination and disgust. I will not make any promises, the captain said finally. But I will investigate your claims. If the Ascendants attack the Eastern Sanctuary as you predict, then I will know you speak truth. At that point, I will consider an alliance with the Traditionalists. But understand this, half-breed. If you or your vampire friends betray us, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth and end your existence personally. I would expect nothing less, Elias said. Thank you for listening, Captain. It may have just saved thousands of lives. Or damned us all, Aldrich muttered. Time will tell. Elias was escorted to the edge of the camp and released. As he prepared to leave, one of the younger soldiers approached him, a boy barely 20, with a guild trainee's mark on his shoulder. Is it true you are Lord Thorn's son? The boy asked quietly. Yes, Elias confirmed. I trained under him for 6 months last year. He spoke of you often, with pride. The boy hesitated. For what it is worth, I do not think you are a monster. I think you are trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. That takes courage. Elias felt unexpected emotion tighten his throat. What is your name? Peter, sir. Thank you, Peter. Your words mean more than you know. He left the garrison and ran through the night back towards Sanctuary, his mission complete. Captain Aldrich had not committed to an alliance, but he had agreed to investigate. It was more than Elias had dared to hope for. When he arrived back at Sanctuary near dawn, exhausted and still bearing silver burns on his wrists, Morgana was waiting at the settlement's entrance. How did it go? She asked. He listened, Elias said. He did not agree, but he listened. We have 6 days to prove our intelligence is correct. If the attack on Eastern Sanctuary happens as predicted, Aldrich will consider joining us. And if the attack does not happen, then we will have lost our chance with the hunters. But I do not think that will be the problem. Your intelligence has been accurate so far. The Ascendants will not suddenly change their plans. Morgana nodded slowly. 6 days. We should use that time to prepare our own defenses here. If the Ascendants attack all 4 sanctuaries simultaneously, we will need every advantage we can muster.